A day removed from becoming the all-time winningest coach in college basketball history, we're going to do a deep dive into what Geno has meant to college basketball, especially his inclusion of Chris Dailey in the celebration of his greatness. You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, quick update on our show. October has been an incredible month as we get into almost all the way up to Thanksgiving. November, everything has really kind of exploded with not only the addition of the UConn women's show that we're doing on a regular basis now, but the exposure that this team is brought this show has been fantastic. And we just want to thank you, the fans. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project that helps send kids to UConn basketball games, both on the women's and men's sides, as well as UConn football games. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to subscribe, follow wherever you listen. Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen, sometimes your second listen, with both shows every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, today on the program, we are joined by T. Baker. T, you are, let me get your bio all together here. You are a contributor to The Next since March of 2021. And currently a contributing editor. You are on the Big East beat as a beat reporter, and you're this is my favorite part of your bio, you're a curator of historical deep dives. So I have to ask you a question right off the bat. In what ways do you think this year's UConn team reflects Geno Auriemma's philosophies as a coach, and where do you see them evolving as a team before we dive into the hoopla of a couple nights ago?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Mark. And yes, I do consider myself a bit of a historian of the game. I think particularly in women's basketball, there's so much rich history that isn't often discussed, wasn't covered in those days. So I definitely find it as a mission to do that myself, including players who have played for Geno Auriemma himself, Chris Dailey. So, I had the chance to be at the game last night and see the historic win for both Geno and Chris Dailey. And it was really just a celebration of their history and how they've been doing this for 40 years together. So I think when it comes to the coaching philosophy, that is kind of a metric for success. Coach Auriemma in the post-game press conference last night talked about having one solid guard, one solid wing, and one big had been his formula to success. You think about teams kind of in the earlier 2000s where you had Renee Montgomery, you had Tina Charles, you had Maya Moore as a threesome on a team. Back in 2016, you had Morgan Tuck, you had Mariah Jefferson, you had Brianna Stewart. There's always that formula. And so I think this year, Geno's thinking about his team. He said it's one of the best teams he's had over the past 5 seasons, and that's because those pieces are there. There's Paige Bueckers, of course, All-American, freshman National Player of the Year. There's Sarah Strong, who's a dynamic, just shooter. She can really do everything. It's really incredible to watch, and she's just getting started. And then we have the return of Azzi Fudd as that sort of like guard player who can shoot. So those pieces are there. And Geno kind of mentioned with the return of Azzi Fudd, his team is whole, and he believes he has those pieces to really manifest his philosophy of how he plays the game and how he'd like to see his offense run.
Do you consider Geno the GOAT? Is he your GOAT?
I mean, it's a tricky question whenever we think about the GOAT. I think the numbers speak for themselves. Geno Auriemma has more wins than any college basketball coach ever. He has been doing it all at one school, which is unique. Tara Vanderveer coached at 3 different schools in her tenure. Mike Krzyzewski coached at 2. So I think what makes him great and what perhaps makes him the GOAT is that he did it all in one school. And he did it at a school that wasn't on the radar whatsoever when he entered it. It's not like he inherited a powerhouse program. He inherited a program in the 80s that was constantly in the bottom of the standings, playing in the field house. Him and Chris Dailey were doing the team laundry together. So, he really built something from nothing. And I think that that puts him in the conversation for the GOAT for sure.
It's okay if he's not, like, in your opinion. Like, remember, we brought you in for your expertise. It's totally okay, because that's part of opinion in terms of podcasts and stuff. I think what the reason why I consider him the GOAT is not just for 12-17 and counting. It's because of exactly what you just said. I mean, I'm originally from Connecticut. I don't live there anymore. I was born and raised in Meriden, and we would go to these games when I was a kid, both men's and women's, and I didn't know like what I was watching until now. You start to appreciate it later, because I said it the other day when I had the privilege of going to the game in Greensboro because it was local to me. Just being in his presence is so different. Like I've interviewed Mike Krzyzewski. I've talked to some of the other great coaches and have relationships in college basketball. I don't know, man. Like there's something about him that he transcends what it's like to be that coach. He comes across in the media, and Dan Hurley even said this, as kind of an a-hole, but he isn't that. Like it's a perception. It's such an interesting thing, and then I'll transition it into saying it's showed even more by his humility in having Chris Dailey essentially be pushed to the front of this celebration. She was celebrated just as much, and you were there. You tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. Geno has a certain aura about him. He's a master at building relationships with people. He's a master at mentoring young women. He's a master at being a coach that has cared about his players on and off the court. And that's special. And you can see that when you hear from him. You can see that in the fact that 62 alumni showed up to yesterday's game to honor him and Chris Dailey. And so when you think about Chris Dailey, associate head coach of the Huskies, she was Geno's first hire in the summer of 1985. And Geno will be the first to tell you this would not have happened without Chris Dailey by his side. She was a Rutgers alum. She won an AIAW championship. That's before the women's game was incorporated in NCAA in 1982 as a member of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. And Geno hired her, and the rest is history. I mean, she has kept sort of like the organizational structure of that program intact in a way that I don't think Geno alone could have done. She's the one kind of enforcing team rules. She's doing trivia on the road. She's making the schedule. She's really running things, and it allows Geno to be himself and use his strengths. And his strength is interacting with the media, doing those things you talked about, being the public face. And she prefers to be in the background, but make no mistake, this is a program run by two people, and it's been that way for 40 years.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better. When we return, we're going to talk about the team as a whole, Paige's impact. Geno talked about Azzi being back and how that makes them whole. We're going to talk about all that with T coming back after the break. Looking for the perfect gift this holiday season? The Skylight Frame is here to make staying connected with loved ones easier and more meaningful than ever. The Skylight Frame is a sleek, touchscreen digital photo frame that lets you instantly share photos with family and friends, no matter where they are. Whether it's a cherished memory or everyday moments, you can upload photos in seconds through the free app or via email. With Skylight Frame, you have ready to use in under a minute. It's seamless photo sharing from anywhere, again, in the world. It's a thoughtful gift that keeps on giving. I gave one to my mom 2 years ago, well before we even were sponsored by Skylight. So it's a perfect gift for my parents, maybe your grandparents, or anyone that you love. Just go to skylightframe.com/college and use the code college at checkout. That's for $20 off your first Skylight Frame. That's skylight.com/college for $20 off today. Don't miss out on the chance to give a gift that connects. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto, and we have T. Baker, Big East beat reporter. T, you were there last night. Let's move past. I mean, we could talk about Geno and Chris and the legacy of UConn for an entire show, but because we do this daily and people are wanting to kind of consume what's going on with this team, what have you seen so far from Paige? Like, for me, it's when I was talking about getting together with you and coming up with questions to ask you, I always have this issue when we talk about Paige, because can anyone really find a knock on her? Like, there's nothing like negative about Paige. She either has a great game or kind of like a good game for a normal player. I think that was the case last night. She had a decent game, but it wasn't all. It's never all or nothing. She's the consensus #1 overall pick in next year's draft. Can anyone say anything bad about her? Like, how would you talk about Paige Bueckers to someone that knew nothing about UConn? Like, how do you describe her?
Well, I think what makes Paige perhaps not always like the player who is showing up on the highlights and on Sports Center, and she is plenty herself. But, you compare to someone like Caitlin Clark scoring 35, 40 points a game, hitting logo threes. I think Paige's game is about efficiency. She, across her career, has nearly 50% field goal percentage from the field, 40 from three, and 90 from free throw. That is a metric of efficiency in this sport that is unmatched by players who are legendary. So she has the ability to really find her spots on the floor, to be efficient when she has the basketball in her hand. And she also has the ability to make those around her better. I think that's the intangible piece. I think, there's a quality about her that when Paige is playing well, the rest of the team's locked in too. She's their leader. And I think her efficiency combined with the fact that she shares the ball, she rebounds, she does everything on the court, and she makes it look easy. Yesterday, I think it was like 5 minutes into the game, I looked up at the scoreboard. She already had 5 rebounds, so it's not all about the scoring. It's about the assists. It's about getting others involved. It's about the intangible leadership, and it's about incredible historic efficiency.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I saw, again, first time ever seeing her in person was last Friday for me, so it was a treat. And so I'm sitting behind the baseline right by UConn's bench in the Greensboro Coliseum, and what I marveled at was her pacing. Like she plays the game on her own time. There may be a shot clock, there may be time left in the quarter or the half, but nothing bothers her. Like in surprisingly for me, having not seen her up close, she talks a little bit of trash, which was awesome. I loved it. I couldn't have been more happy to see her, and it wasn't even in like an arrogant way. It was just like she said to Lexi Donarski that when Lexi tried to post her up and she blocked her, she went, "Don't post me up," like just like that. Like that was it. Like it was just very subtle, to the point, very very Kobe-esque, who I know she quotes on a regular basis. The knock on Paige, I guess the only thing that people have said is because of the injuries, she hasn't finished like a season where they've won a title. And that's something that is kind of like a rite of passage for UConn players. But she also hasn't had the help. And now we have Sarah Strong with her. What did you see about Sarah last night? Or when you were at the game? Because to me, she looked the best she's played all year from an all-around standpoint, scoring, rebounding, assisting.
Yeah, well, those two together is a scary combination, because Sarah Strong, also an incredibly efficient player, fast hands on defense. She can hit the three, she can post up, she can pull up in the mid-range. Like she can do so much. She's such a dynamic player. And Geno said post-game, after she, was the leading scorer in the game and really asserted herself on the offensive end, that she needs to be reminded sometimes to shoot the ball. He made the comparison. Maya Moore was never afraid to shoot the ball when she was open, or even if she had 1 or 2 defenders on her. I think with freshmen, there's sometimes a tendency to default to the older players to wait your turn. But I think Geno's really given her the keys to say, go out there and hoop, because we need you and you're a key member of this team, and your talent speaks for itself. So I think the two of them together, it just creates such a nightmare for defenses. Like, which one do you pick up? Who do you cover? They can take it into the post. They can pull from three. So you really have to have your eye on them the whole game. And I think, like you mentioned, yeah, Paige has never won a championship, but every single year that she's played in the NCAA tournament, which is 3 times, they've made it to the Final Four. So the one year they didn't make it to the Final Four. So sometimes it's about having that X factor player, and Paige is certainly that. Sarah Strong is certainly that. And, just having a supporting cast. There's been just honestly like cursed injury history over the past couple of years for the Huskies. So having healthy players, having backup on the bench is a luxury they haven't had. And I think if they can stay healthy, that depth will take them far.
Without a doubt. All right, man. Listen, we're going to take one more break, and when we come back, I want to celebrate one of our best players coming back. Azzi Fudd made her debut in the same game where Geno broke the record, which is pretty cool. She played 12 minutes. I want to talk about what she brings to UConn in your opinion. And can they challenge South Carolina for a national championship this year, amongst others, when we return? All right. kind of screwed up there, but we're going to ride with it anyway. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started again with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto. We have T. Baker with us, Big East beat reporter. All right, T. Azzi Fudd made her return last night. I don't think there's anybody that probably was more excited for her than probably the coaching staff with Geno, CD, and others. I mean, she's been through so much. She told, I think it was Maggie Vanoni of Connecticut Insider, that she was essentially, they went through trauma bonding between her and her teammates through all of last year and kind of waiting her turn. She's an incredible talent. How do you think her as a healthy player will shape this team this season, and what do you expect her impact to be as the year progresses?
Yeah, well, first of all, Azzi is just such a great addition to the program. Good culture fit. She works so hard. She's worked so hard to get back from various injuries since she was in high school, major ACL, MCL injuries. So a testament to her and her strength and her hard work and her just ability to pick herself back up after really devastating injuries. But Azzi is a generational type talent. She's a gifted shooter. I think she has one of the prettiest jump shots, 3-point shots I've seen. She moves well without the ball. She's able to add to UConn's backcourt a dynamic where, you might have Paige Bueckers bringing the ball up the court, or Caitlin Chen bringing up the ball up the court, and their shooting guard on the wing is Azzi Fudd. So those players draw in so much attention themselves, but you can't forget about Azzi Fudd on the wing. And I think UConn can exploit those matchups, right? That they have just such skilled shooters, and Azzi Fudd leads that. UConn's coach Geno Auriemma said, she makes their team whole. She rounds out the roster. She's been that missing piece. And so I think if she's able to get back and be a healthy player, kind of reach her potential, she can be the difference maker for UConn this year and get them over that hump to a national championship. I think she's been that missing piece, and her and Paige Bueckers are best friends. Large reason why Azzi's at UConn is because of Paige. So they have tragically not played together too often. So I'm excited she's back, but I can't get too excited because it's been taken away from me too many times. So.
It's true. No, you're spot on. I think there's plenty of people that have that same, cautious optimism or trepidation around getting too giddy about Azzi's return.
Yeah.
So I agree with you there. I think there's also a celebration aspect of she's back doing what she loves. And I think that's the beauty of all of it. She's been through so much. Like the article that I read and talked to Maggie last Friday about, she just seems to be such a good kid. So I want her to do well, not only for UConn, but just for her own kind of like sanity, mental well-being. It's got to be incredibly difficult to sit there and watch your team do things without you that you can help with. So you mentioned South Carolina. You're a pro at this because I think we were going down this route anyway. UConn has a really big, tough gauntlet of teams that they're playing. Notre Dame, they're playing USC this year, amongst others. But they also are playing South Carolina, which is a big game in Columbia. Are they prepared to play a team like South Carolina, who's going to be the favorite to win the national championship this year?
South Carolina, until they are beaten, is the best team in the country, right? They're the defending national champions. They went undefeated last year. I had the chance to watch them compete in the Final Four last year and ultimately win the championship. Dawn Staley is just a legendary coach. She calls herself a dream merchant. She's able to get her players to do things that they don't think is possible, right? And she has the recruiting chops that's good as anyone around the country, right? So they have just a stacked roster. When you think about Malaysia Fulwiley, you think about in the post, they have Chloe Kitts. They've added Joyce Edwards. They lost Camila Cardoso to the WNBA, but they picked up pieces. There's no shortage of talent. And these two teams, I think, in the past where South Carolina in the past several years has really been able to exploit UConn is in the post. The post hasn't been UConn's strongest. They have incredible guard play. I think that this year you see the development of Ice Brady, who missed her freshman season and last year had some growing pains as sort of backup to Aaliyah Edwards. You see Jana El-Alfi, who is, to me, one of the most exciting players on UConn's roster. She's a big, she can muscle down in the post. She's grabbing rebounds. She plays with a fire and determination that I think is really fitting in well with UConn's culture. So I think if there's anything that's going to help UConn beat South Carolina this year, it's the development of those post players so that they can match them on the boards. That's where South Carolina just runs away with games, that their just ability to rebound and take over games, second chance points. But I think if UConn's able to really develop their posts, I think Sarah Strong, because she's such a big wing, can also muscle in the post and be used in that way. So I think this could be the year that they, regain control of that series. I think it's going to be really interesting to see when they go down to Columbia. I think it could be Final Four national championship game preview, because I do expect that both of these teams, if they stay healthy, will be at the Final Four this April.
I mean, so does Geno Auriemma. There's a clip of him saying, "Just give me 5 healthy bodies, and we're going to make the Final Four." So,
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with you there. You answered one of my questions. One of my follow-ups was, Jana is still developing. You can see that Geno sees the talent because he's tough on her. Like I've seen it in person now, where he's like, and anytime she's in the game, he's like, "Oh, come on, Jana!" Like it happens all the time. And so because of that, the South Carolina game's not till February, so there's time. If she develops, I agree with you. If she doesn't, it's going to be difficult, because then you have to change what you're doing and have, like you said, have Sarah kind of be more of a post presence, and it takes away some of the things that make her great. So I don't know, man. Like I'm torn. I think there's a really good possibility that this team outscores them. But if they don't get that post presence, because I love the inside outside game of Sarah and Ice right now.
Yeah.
But Jana's just not there yet. She's gonna be, but I don't know if she's gonna be there this year. That's the trick. Do you see what I'm saying, or you think I'm off base?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's always the question, right? Like, how does a player return? She had an Achilles injury. You got to consider that she's getting used to her new normal in terms of how her body works. That's a major injury. I think, one thing we know about Geno and CD predominantly works with a lot of those post players. They know how to get the best out of their players. So, Geno has historically been hardest on the players that he knows has the highest potential. And the way he's talked about her makes me think that there's things that are going on in practice that we don't see, that she's got it within her. She's just got to unlock it. And, we're in November, so she's got time. I'm curious if she works her way into the starting lineup at any point, or if Ice will keep, her position in the starting lineup. But I think that, she's one of those X factors for UConn in beating a team like South Carolina, because that post presence is just what they've missed over the past several seasons.
Without a doubt. Well, listen, T, I really appreciate you being on the show. And when this drops on Friday morning, we'll go into the weekend, and hopefully we'll see you again. And you have I'll probably see you before then, but hopefully you have a great Thanksgiving. And again, really appreciate you jumping on the show and giving us your perspective.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
All right, that's today's episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. For T. Baker, we're asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day, and it's been the goal for 40 years for Geno and for Chris. Thank you to both of them, and as always, go Huskies.